Hello, everybody. Today I wanted to give a lecture on one of the pre-Socratics from our textbook, the pre-Socratic Thales. So, understanding the pre-Socratics is actually really helpful in understanding the entire history of Greek philosophy. I think the best way to think about the pre-Socratics is to understand them as trying to move away from a reliance on myth and mythological belief, and instead to try to explain what is happening in the world on the basis of observations, on the basis of giving reasons or arguments, or something like we might call modern science. But of course, we have to remember that what we refer to as science hasn't even been invented yet. These pre Socratic Greek philosophers are really starting to lay the groundwork for what will eventually become modern science. So, what the pre Socratics tried to do is say instead of relying on mythological belief, instead of relying on stories that we are told are true, we could instead actually rely on knowledge to understand the things that are happening in our world. So, what the pre Socratics did is they tried to come up with ways that we could know things about the world around us. Now, their idea was that in order to know something, that knowledge would need to be attached to something permanent, something unchanging. The idea is if what we're trying to know is constantly changing from day to day or hour, minute to minute, it's hard to say we actually have knowledge. You might be able to know that my name is Zach, but if my name changes every 5 minutes, then you're not able to know what my name is. So the idea is knowledge needs to be attached to something permanent, something constant. The problem that the pre Socratics found is that when you look out in the world, everything seems to be in a constant state of change. We don't seem to be able to find that permanence that we need in order to know things. So, this becomes the central problem for the pre Socratic philosophers. How can we have knowledge of something permanent in a world that presents us with nothing but constant change? Thales attempts to answer this question. The way Thales does this is to say, okay, maybe everything in the world appears to be in a constant state of change. But underneath that change, underlying all the different forms that objects take, maybe there's something permanent. Maybe there's some basic element or basic material that everything in the world is made out of. So Thales tries to answer this question by finding a basic substance that could be the source of everything that is and everything that exists. Now, the ancient Greeks were of the belief that there were four basic elements in the world: earth, air, fire, and water. So what Thales does is he tries to establish which one of those four would be primary, which one would be the fundamental element that everything in the world would be constructed out of. And he arrives at the answer of water. Now, the reason that he arrives at water, he goes through a number of arguments, but one of them is that, in his view, every living thing requires water. Not all living things require fire. Not all living things require earth. There are plenty of creatures that live in the sea. Not all living things require air. Once again, we have fish and creatures living in the sea that at least Thales doesn't think need air. We might know now that these fish need oxygen, but in Thales' view, they don't require air. But every living thing requires water. Plants need water in order to grow. Land creatures need water in order to survive. Creatures that live in the sea obviously need water as kind of their basic environment. So the fact that every living thing needs water makes Thales believe that water is the most likely candidate to be that basic element. So when we see change in the world, when we see things transforming, all we're really seeing is that basic element, water, taking different forms, combining itself in different ways, manifesting itself in different kinds of appearances. So even though it appears that everything in the world is constantly changing, underneath that change there is an unchanging, constant, eternal, universal element, water. And so now if we want to have knowledge about the world, we can study that element. We can understand why water transforms the way it does, why water combines in different ways, etc. Now, we know that not everything is made out of water, but let's give Thales a little bit of credit here. His view is actually not that far off from a modern scientific understanding of the world. Now we would say that all things in the world are constructed of energy, and that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, and it simply takes different forms, and that's what we mean when we talk about change. So, although we might not all leave this lecture thinking that water is the basic element that makes up everything in our world, at least we can see what Thales was trying to do and what the pre-Socratics were trying to do. Now, Plato is going to pick up this problem as well. But the way Plato is going to try to answer it is by developing his theory of the forms, which is something that we'll read about and talk more about as the semester